This is the Youth Soccer Revolution Podcast, episode number 14. Welcome back to the Youth Soccer Revolution Podcast. My name is Ernesto Diaz. Thank you so much for joining us again. I really want to thank you for taking time out of your day, and I can't thank you guys enough for all the support I've received all year. I want to wish you guys all a happy new year. Today we have the pleasure of speaking to Mark O'Sullivan. Mark wrote an article entitled Development Model or the Emperor's New Clothes. The article, which I'll put a link to on the show notes, it discusses different player development models and that are advertised by clubs. Us as parents, when we're taking our child into a club, any club can claim or advertise that they have implemented a certain specific development model, but are the coaches really implementing it correctly, and how can its effectiveness be measured? I think that's one of the issues that many parents run into, especially if they don't know much about soccer. Any advertisement, any claim by a club about a certain specific model that they may be using, that can be difficult to process for a new parent getting into soccer. So just want to discuss this with Mark because I thought he brought really good insight into to how we should be looking at player development models and some of the issues that some of the parents may run into. I'm really glad he took time out of his day to join us during the interview. You can hear that one of his kids wanted to talk to him, but and I left that in there because it just goes to show that all of us here on the podcast, all my friends that come on the podcast and join me to discuss player development. These are regular people, just like me and you. Some of them have played for a very long time. Others have coached for a long time, while others have done a lot of research. And, I just can't thank them enough for taking time out of their day. This is all free. They come on here, they take their time. I don't pay them anything. I don't get paid anything to do this. And I hope you like it, and I hope you continue to support the show. But at the end of the day, we're all in the same boat. We're trying to help each child improve, and we don't want to leave anyone behind. So we definitely want to make sure that we have as much impact as we can on the world. As I look at the downloads for the podcast, we're getting downloads from Romania, Denmark, all across Europe and South America, Australia, obviously the UK and the US, that's where we're based out of. I think it's reaching a lot of people and it's helping a lot of people. If you know, or if you are someone that would like to come on the show and join me and to talk about player development, or if you have a tool or something that can help us out, definitely send me an email, let me know, and we'll try to get you on. I definitely want to make sure that we help out as many people as we can. So again, it's the end of the year and we're going to start off a new year, but I really want to thank all of our guests for coming on the show and sharing their knowledge and their expertise with us. We'll get back to Mark O'Sullivan, who will be discussing his article that he wrote about the development models used. One of the interesting things that he discussed as well is when kids are playing on their own, they're in total control. Once we start setting up cones, once we start telling them what to do, how to play, they are no longer in control. So how much are they really learning? Mark will discuss a little bit more about that. I hope you enjoyed the show. And I hope that you get ready for 2015 because we have a lot of new guests coming on the show, and I'm really excited for 2015. You're formerly from, well, you were born in Ireland, yeah, but you moved to Sweden. Yeah, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm from Cork City, Ireland, and been living in Sweden for around 20 years now.
We brought Mark on today because he's got an interesting take on player development. So why don't you go ahead and tell the listeners a little bit about yourself so we can get to know you better.
Okay. Well, I have quite an eclectic background. As a kid, my two passions was music and soccer. Learned a lot about music, collected records, played instruments, but also played a lot of sports. But soccer was my real passion. I played at an elite level in Ireland. And I also played Gaelic football at quite a good level. Then I went to university, studied computer science and economics for some very strange reason. I still don't know why. But I graduated from university, was kind of still involved in football and music. And when I moved to Sweden, I just continued working with football and music. Actually, music took over for quite a while. And then I was at a festival in 2006 in Roskilde in Denmark. And the World Cup was on, and I was coaching at the time as well, but the World Cup was on, and I found that I didn't want to go on stage because the game was one of the games was going to extra time. I didn't want to go on because I wanted to watch the game, but I had to go on stage, of course. And then I kind of thought to myself, well, Mark, maybe you are a bit more interested in soccer and coaching. So that's what I've concentrated full time on now.
Okay, and about when was that?
I guess I've really just focused on it from 2006 on, but I've always been involved in it, As I said, I played at a high level and kind of take a step back from it for a while and then come back into it again. Because I was actually earning a living within music. It was actually within techno and house. And I believe you're from Detroit, Michigan, is it?
Yeah, well, I'm close to Detroit. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Not exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. Well, that's a lot of my influences musically would come from that. But I know we're not here to talk about music. But it was. I can remember 2006 is exactly because I was working with both, and that's when it just happened for me. And I just said, look, I am more interested, and so I've really gone on this mad journey of basically just discovering what is learning and learning in soccer and in sport.
Great. So take us back a little bit more to when you were younger and you first started playing soccer. Like what got you into it? What do you remember about it, and what did you like about it?
Well, I think what I really liked about it, and it's obviously I didn't probably notice it at the time, but looking back, was that the only adult voice I heard was when I was called in for dinner, because we used to always play on the street, and the only time you'd hear an adult voice is when you're being called in for dinner or something, or it's late, come in.
And that's in Ireland, right?
Yeah, that's in Ireland. We just always played in the street. It was fantastic. I didn't play anything organised until I was 9 or 10. We did in school, of course. We played, we had a school team in Gaelic football, which is another sport, but soccer was just always on the street. But then again, we always played other sports. We played tennis on the street when Wimbledon was on TV. We played, for some reason, we played rugby on the street. I still can't figure that out today. Rugby and concrete, but we were 7, 8, 9. It was big deal. But so we played mainly on the street or just after school in the school field. It was it's just what you did. You just turned up and you played, and you didn't. We didn't have mobile phones at the time. We had nothing else. We just went out. Somebody always turned up with a ball. That's another interesting thing. Where did the ball come from? No, I still don't know. Somebody always was there with a football. So
yeah. And so you when did you start playing the more structured?
I guess I was 9, 10.
And did you get into a club? I mean, how did it get started? I started
training with a club, and I joined a local club, Tramore Athletic in Cork, and I had a very fascinating coach that he actually just, all we did was game-centered stuff. I still to this day don't know, was it that he didn't really have a great understanding of football, or he had an amazing understanding of the game? I still don't know, because he worked in the local gas company, and about 10 of us used to go into his van and go to games. Highly illegal and everything, but fascinating times. But we always games. That's all it was, just constantly. So we trained once a week, had a game once a week, and it was just, everything was games. We never learned technique, never needed to.
So, and was that because you had already learned it playing on the streets, or
I guess so.
Just the coaching philosophy?
Yeah, I guess so. You kind of just, I guess, the body just self-organized, and you figure out what's best for you. But also it was a lot of, you'd see something on TV. I mean, this was a time, for me, of great imagination. I only spoke recently to a friend of mine when it was 1978 World Cup. I was, 10, I think, 9, 10. And Mario Kempes was the hero for Argentina. And I can still to this day remember my best friend wanted to grow his hair long like Mario Kempes, just to play football with long hair. And that was it. We became these world stars. We commentated on our games. It was a great time of imagination. And we watched what they did and we just copied it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what you do.
That's basically it. I mean, I don't know how... This is my daughter.
Yeah.
Okay. Millie, I'm talking.
What?
Okay? I'm doing an interview, okay?
What?
I'm doing an interview. I'm talking to somebody. He's from America.
Hi.
No, but so it was just... Yeah, you figured it out. You learned. I learned to kick with both feet on the streets. You learned so much more because, the surfaces were uneven. The ball bounced in different directions. So I guess it was kind of a lot of variability when we were learning techniques. The ball would come to you at different angles, and it was quite unpredictable.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of variability involved in the learning as well, which has probably really helped, I think.
And so you said you played at a high level. How high did you reach?
I played a few games at the top level in Ireland. Before I went to university, I was only 18. And then when I started university, I played in the second league in Ireland.
You said after you started the university?
Before. No, I played in the top league before I started university. I played a few games. Top league.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah.
What was your experience like?
It was the League of Ireland at the time, and I think that I was fit because I was playing Gaelic football a lot in my school. And we had a really inspirational trainer, and even though my passion for soccer, I had a bigger passion for soccer than for Gaelic football, I had a very inspiring Gaelic football coach who really, really worked my brain and worked on the physical side. He worked on everything with me, and he was really inspiring. So when I actually went to play some League of Ireland games with clubs, I was actually very disappointed with the training. I found it very... I was just very disappointed. I thought it would be more organised, but that was the time. It was an amateur sport in Ireland at the time. It's far more professional now.
And when about was that again?
What?
About what time was that again?
That was 86, I think.
Okay.
I'm 47 now. And I played a few games, and I enjoyed it.
And so that leads us to today. I mean, today you're writing on your blog.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of the things that we wanted to discuss today, and you had a really good piece titled "Development Model for the Emperor's New Clothes," and it's basically an article about the different types of development models that each club puts together, or attempts to implement. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I thought was interesting was the way you said that a club could come out with a new development model and kind of try to sell it and say, yeah, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, it's going to be all about players. But then when they go into implement it, it may not be exactly what they were stating that it was going to be implemented.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you were in that?
Yeah, that is the Emperor's New Clothes. I mean, it's almost false advertising. I mean,
so what made you want? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What made me want to write this? I guess is your question.
Yeah.
I think like this. I'm very suspicious of stuff that looks far too organised. It's like I live in Sweden. When you go to IKEA here, I get very nervous. Or you turn up at that party. When I turn up at a party in a house I'm invited, I've never been, and it looks like it's so clean. It looks like nobody's ever lived there. I get very nervous. I think. And so you go to a training session and you see cones in line, looks perfect, kids kicking ball from cone to cone, looks really nice. And that really irritates me. Because I personally don't feel that that's learning. And then I guess it just looks so organised and nice, and I just can't relate to it. I don't know. And so when I saw looking at the LTAD model, I'm not saying that it's a bad model or anything, but the fact that it looked so structured and organised and prescriptive, it got me thinking. So I went on this journey of speaking with people like Dr. Martin Toms and Jean Coté, far more knowledgeable people than me in this area, with regard to it, and try to get their opinions and see if my thoughts and how I felt about it.
First of all, long-term athletic development model, that's what it's called. And it's being used by Canada, am I right?
Yeah.
But is that also for their hockey program as well?
Yeah, I think it seems to be used in as many programs as possible. For me, it struck me like a business. It looked like a business, it's just a kind of a business that they were selling a product. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. I'm not saying that that's wrong. There's lots of good stuff in there, but there's lots of stuff that I found that I had misapprehensions about, that I wasn't sure about, that I said, this doesn't feel right to me. and of course, like, I come from a coaching background, so I had to go on a journey, as I said, to people like Jean Coté, Mark Upton, even Dr. Martin Thomas, and get there. People who work with this and study this, and get their interpretations on it and see how that reflected mine. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's basically it. And I feel that the model for me felt that it was far too fragile. And that basically the problem was that, if we get back to your original question, is that it's so easy to throw any content into that model. Yeah, I just felt you could throw as much content in as possible, and it could be anything. And that's what I discussed in this, because I've looked at various models from clubs here in Sweden, around the world. I looked at various models around the world, and I just thought, hang on a minute here. The LTDA model is the same, but everyone's throwing different sort of content in, or content maybe that suits them now. Content that makes it look like we're changing everything that we're doing, so we're kind of relaunching our club and we're relaunching with a new idea and a model. Well, actually, we're just doing the same thing again, with different names, but we're going to throw it into this model so it looks totally different, if you understand what I mean.
Like you said, it's very structured. I mean, they have stage 1, stage 2, and each one of them, for boys and girls, it has their different ages.
Yeah. And there is no evidence that these stages actually exist.
Yes, correct.
That's the thing, there is no evidence. People develop differently, and when I look at that model, I think that, and it also, the model, I feel, kind of neglects the psychosocial aspects of development, which I think are quite enormous when you think back to your own years I think back to my, especially in teenage years, the psychosocial development, all the uncertainty and everything that comes with it. And I feel that the ages and stages seem to ignore this as well. I feel it's very fragile in that way. And they were all, I had no scientific background, and that's why I went to Jean Coté and Dr. Martin Toms and people who've done research in this. And it seems that my suspicions were confirmed by them, their perspective as well.
And in your article, you took the LTAD as an example, but you're not just specifically talking about them. There's very many development models that kind of fall into this. Yeah,
I guess there are. I think you can, if you're clever enough, you can manipulate any model to suit your own needs, and that's the problem. That is why I'm arguing for content. It really doesn't matter, I guess, the model at the end of the day. You've got to have content. And your content must, especially if you're working with kids, it must be content that is related to child development, the biopsychosocial development of children, within the sporting context. And the whole structure must be from a child's perspective, not an adult's perspective. And there we have one of the major problems, I feel, in youth sport, that it's very much driven from adult perspective.
Yeah, because you mentioned clubs and organizations can wave the flag for as many as possible, as long as possible. So that might be what they're selling, but yet at the same time include content that proposes an early selection process.
Exactly. Yeah, but that's what parents want to hear. Hey, as many as possible, as long as possible. And that's what the government want to hear. Great, we're doing this, but then, where you're 10, we're having 10-year-olds or 7-year-olds even, we're going to have selection processes for them, and categorize them into levels and teams, and which which I think in a sport where, should we call it elite performance, is not decided until after maturity. It's kind of bizarre that we're betting 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds.
Right. Well, yeah, we don't even know how they're going to develop. So.
No, and we're ignoring the psychosocial development that has to go on. There's so much can happen, these on the way. And, I was reading there that in Europe alone, there are 60 million people play football. 60,000 have professional contracts. That was at 0.01%. So wow. I guess my question is, are we structuring our clubs, our talent ID programs, our education programs in our clubs for this 0.01%? Because that seems to be what many clubs are doing.
Let's talk a little bit about the 5 problems with using a traditional linear model in a dynamic sport such as soccer, which you mentioned. First one is the assumption that all players or learners should take the same learning path. The assumption is that if it is taught, then learning will follow.
Many traditional models, they have this, you got to learn this technique first before you play the game. I guess that's what I'm touching on there. Maybe that learners come from different angles. I actually addressed this in my new blog, which is just up now, and it's like some say you want to learn passing and control. Some learners come in from the communication angle as opposed to the physical angle of technique. But if we're going to focus on this is how you learn and that's the only way you learn, that's not really that's a one size fits all model, and that's not really how we learn. And the fact is, many coaches think, well, you should know how to do this. You should know how to beat a man 1-on-1 or defend 1-on-1 because we did it in training and I taught you that. But teaching and learning, it's 2 different things. Just because you taught something doesn't mean that person has learned it.
No, yeah, I've seen it all the time, and I've even fallen into that myself. When I was learning as a coach, wait a minute, we've gone through this already. Why wouldn't you know already?
And I still think that way sometimes. Of course, it's human nature. It's natural. It's the school system we've been put through.
Yeah. So then number 2, as many traditional linear systems are skill acquisition based, we are possibly removing control from the learner. This is true especially in the early years when children may prefer to explore the game so that it becomes more personal and meaningful to them.
Yeah, well, here we're touching on the difference between deliberate play and deliberate practice. We're forcing kids far too early from a play environment into a practice environment. And then we're forcing them into systems whereby we're doing, say, technique acquisition, skill acquisition training, which means that all the decisions are made by the rules of the drill, as opposed to if you have a more game-centered approach, which is more deliberate play approach, the decisions are made by what the young person sees in the game, if you understand. So like a traditional skill acquisition thing would be, A passes to B, who passes to C, back to A, So the rule of the drill is deciding everything. So all decisions are made by the rule. But in a more game-based, deliberate play-based approach, I guess which is something, I guess we go back to the street football thing again, more play approach, that the decisions are made by what the actual young player sees. The information, the perception, what it perceives, the information it takes in from the environment.
And then you go ahead. Were you finished?
I think so.
Okay. So the interesting part about that I took out was that it becomes more personal and meaningful to them.
Yes, of course. Like play. Kids just play because it's what they do. It is the most natural thing, that a kid wants to play. And if you ever watch a kid playing, they are totally in control of that moment, of their development in that moment. They want instant satisfaction. It's so instant, and I think that when we force them into a practice environment, we make things less personal. And I think that's a big danger.
Yeah, and I think it goes along with number 3, with the development of intrinsic motivation, which if they're out there because they want to be out there, they want to be playing, and they're going to learn even more, right?
I agree. I spoke with I just did an interview for a book I'm writing with Celso Borges. He played in the World Cup for Costa Rica. And he plays here in Sweden, but he just had a great World Cup in Brazil with Costa Rica. And I did an interview about his childhood, and he gave me a great line that I just love. And he said, "I just felt I could improve at anything I enjoyed." And I think that's fantastic. Yeah. I can improve anything I enjoyed, and that really is what it is. It's I have yet to this day meet a 8 or 9 year old that says, "I can't wait to go training tonight. We're going to stand by a cone and pass to it."
Yeah, no, I mean, Mark, look, my 7-year-old daughter, she's a good little player, and she tells me sometimes when we go to training, and it's part of the reason that I got into this is, she says, "Hey, are we going to do drills or are we going to play?" Kids want to play,
Exactly. They're there to play.
They just want to go out there and have fun.
This is what I'm on about, the first experience. We cannot drag them from the play environment into a practice environment too early. As you said, just like your daughter, she wants to play. Are we going to play? And that's why, people play, unfortunately, the game becomes a reward at the end of training if you carry out these skills or techniques, which is really, really, really sad, I think, because kids are there to play. And again, we're looking at how the adult perceives the game and how the child perceives the game. It goes back to this. I think maybe the main point I've been making in a lot of stuff in my blog is that we adults know what is good for children, but we deliver it in an adult way, not in a child-friendly way. And we deliver it from an adult perspective, not a child's perspective.
Yeah.
Like the coach knows that your daughter wants to play football, but he thinks that they have to do all these skills, but she doesn't see that she's there to play. And through play, she can learn these skills.
Your 5th one says early performance in linear models is often influenced by physiological differences. Yeah. So just kids being either more athletic, bigger, stronger.
The classic REE effect, relative age effect as well. Born early in the year, playing a team, just happen to be maybe physically larger, maybe have better coordination skills, better balance skills, because they're just slightly more developed. And that's often the most early performances, I think, in children are often judged by that. I've recently had a meeting with a club I work with, and they were telling me about some players, and these kids are only 9, and they were saying that, we've got some really good players, and we've got some okay players and bad players. And I said, "What do you mean?" And they were saying, "Well, we've got some good players." And I said, "But what do you mean? A good player? What does he do?" "Oh, this guy is really good and he's fast and he's got a great shot." Okay, he's fast and he kicks the ball hard. And I think, so they're the hard skills, they're called. And what about the soft skills? How does he understand the game? Does he know when to drop into space? Does he know, how to open up? And they're going, "What are you talking about?" And I'm thinking that, okay, so you're looking at players here and you're only judging by the fact how hard they can kick a ball or how fast they are with a ball or, how fast they can dribble. But there's so much more to it, I said, do you ever look at the player that's there, maybe is not physically developed, but is thinking about the game and gets into good positions and maybe intercepts a pass by good timing? Do you see these things? And many times, many people don't. But I guess it's easier to measure the hard skills. Soft skills are much harder to measure. And very much in these early performance linear models where there's early selection processes, we as coaches, if we're involved in a club that promotes early selection, then we need early results. So we go for the easy bet, the sure shot, the one that will get us the result. And that's the guy who can whack the ball really hard, the guy who's really fast, or slightly more physically developed.
Yeah.
And I guess also it's a great thing, as Lynn Kidman said to me in an interview I did, where she said that this is typical because it's actually easier not to work with learners at this age. And that is so.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
Because these guys are fast and quick and stronger than the others, there will be a result anyway. You're not working with learners. Maybe the guy, the young small guy who finds space, who is always opening up a passing option. He's closing off the passing line when defending. He's the guy that not many people see, but he's the learner. He's the clever guy. He's thinking. He's the brain.
Yeah.
And that for me, I look for when I work with young kids. I look for things like this. If you're a young coach, particularly if you're a parent coach, it's easier to work with the guy that is fast and strong and kicks the ball harder than actually coaching the guy with the game intelligence.
Yeah, because you can measure that right away. Oh, look how hard he kicks it. Look how hard he runs.
Let's put him up front and just you in the back kick the ball to him, and we'll score loads of goals.
Yes,
and this is, and I don't think that is working with learners.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the kids' fault either. It's an adult perception.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, how close do you know the Swedish Football Association's new development plan?
Well, I've been speaking to him a lot about it recently.
Mm-hmm. So, because they do have a new player development.
Yeah, and they're releasing one in next year. And they're redoing it still. They have a new one out, but it seems to be that they're kind of putting a bit more shape to it now. I spoke with someone from it last week, and they're nearly there now. And I don't know. It seems what they say. It seems very interesting, I think.
Yeah, from what you stated, it sounds like their plan is to take into account the child's maturity level and adapt the sport to the child's physiological, psychological, and social needs.
I hope so. That's what they said to me. And that's why I said I'd be really, really interested to see how they implement this among coaches, because if it is a football association model, I really think they need to work hard in implementing it in all the districts and clubs around the country. It's very important. One thing that really annoys me is development models that are on homepages.
Tell me more.
And that means that they're just on homepages. I want to see them implemented.
Yes.
Administration is one of the biggest curses, I think, in youth sports. There's so many clubs. Oh, here's our model, here's our values, here's this, here's that. It's all on the homepage. But then you say, okay, where is this being implemented? But I've spoken to them, and there's a lot of very ambitious people in the Football Association really want to get this work done, and that's quite impressive. So at the moment they're talking the talk now. So
yeah, so it'd be interesting to see how, first of all, they implement it, and number two, how they measure the implementation. Whether it's being implemented by the coaches or not. Yeah,
and I'm kind of fascinated to see how they're actually going to do this. Because this is not easy. It cannot be easy to change to tradition. They've educated a lot of coaches through their system, through a very traditional system, I think, in my point of view. And now they're coming out with a new system, and they're adding stuff like deliberate play and self-determination theory and things like that. And how are they going to introduce that to the coaches they've already educated?
Mm-hmm.
And I really, really hope they can do this.
And then you discussed the development model of sport participation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The DMSP.
Yeah.
And you said you talked to the person that developed it, which is Jean Cote. Okay. Yeah. And where's he from? Is he from Canada as well?
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit more about the development model of sport participation?
I found it interesting because it took into account performance, participation, and personal development. It was just those three words really caught me, and I think it looks to be something that is a development model that's interested in the whole person, that does understand the biopsychosocial needs and development in children.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand the model correctly, because as you go up in age, starting at about, I think, 11, 12, it seems like there's three different paths that they could take. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, the recreational, specialization, or the early specialization.
Yeah, and then there's the outcomes for each of these, the possible outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it is like, I mean, in the review of the paper, he says, of course you can specialize early, and of course you can succeed and become this top professional player. But I agree with him. We discussed this. Most models will produce players. You know, any model will produce a player, but it's the waste product, you could say, that's left. So clubs that have early selection and early specialization, you know, yeah, they can say, hey, look, we developed this player, but show me your waste product there is usually enormous. So when Jean Coté is referring to the performance, which is what early specialization, excuse me, and early selection models focus on, alone, they seem to neglect personal development and participation, because the model that focuses only on performance does tend to have a big burnout and dropout. What I get from this model and what I like about it is that it proposes that we should focus on the three outcomes of participation, performance, and personal development. We should focus on them. They should be our goals or aims. And by focusing on them, we will produce. And I believe we produce players, but also the waste product, the dropout and the burnout will be less as well. Because it's also about developing people as well. You know, we're working with people here. Mm-hmm. You know, not everyone's going to become an elite athlete, but every child's going to become an adult. And I guess we're into the issues of social capital there, that, you know, we have to prepare our children for the future.
And so moving on to the coaching and context, you mentioned to see it as a biopsychosocial process, designing practice that reflects the demands of the game and encouraging players to take control over their own development, respects that learning is nonlinear, development is nonlinear, and that talent is nonlinear. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
We know through research that learning is nonlinear. I'm sure you probably go through your school years. You know, I think of myself. I was useless at mathematics until I was 16, and suddenly something happened, and I ended up doing it in university. So, you know, it's all development is non-linear. I think the only things that are linear in life are taxes. They always go up. And probably death as well.
Yeah.
But when I say coaching in context, in the context of the game, in the context of the needs of the child, is that if we go back to what we discussed earlier about deliberate play and deliberate practice, that we take your daughter is 7. She's going to practice, she's going to training. She wants to experience the game, and she wants to experience the game that is suitable for her age. She doesn't want to experience the drill. So as she says, are we going to play? She wants to play. She's there to play. So in the context of the needs of the child, you have to provide the environment where your daughter experiences the game through play. So that can be by playing small-sided games or some fun games where there's problems to solve. Games that as well as developing technique, in some way, excite the brain, develop a thinker, make your daughter take decisions, but that meet her needs. And your daughter's need as a 7-year-old is to play. I can give you an example. I had this football school here every Sunday for the last year and a half, and it's just 5-year-olds. But it's not a football school. We call it football's leak, which means football's fun, football play. And it's just 5-year-olds, and we have a load of footballs. And what I do then is, okay, they're 5. You know, they kind of live somewhere between this imaginary world and reality all the time. You know, the ball can be a ball of fire. You know, they some kids come dressed as Superman. You know, and that's who they are. Yeah. So I always start with this magic trick I have, called a magic ball. And the reason why I do that is because I'm visiting their imaginary world for a while, a world of magic and fantasy. And we start with this, and that's their needs, you know. So and it always works. They love it, and immediately then that means that I'm in their world, and then we play, and we just play the game. We we set up 3 against 3, and you just ask them, okay, where do you score a goal? Own that goal. And where do you stop them from scoring this goal? And that's it. You just play. So that's their needs. That's all they want.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also relative to the game. You'd be surprised how quick a group of 5 and 6-year-olds work out, well, I'm scoring in that goal, and I'm going to stop you from scoring in that goal. Of course, they all do it at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen it? But again, where we're speaking about the needs of the child, that's their need. They need to play. So I meet them at that level.
It definitely does. I hope it makes sense to our listeners as well.
And it goes up with age. I work with a lot of 12-year-olds now who are putting a lot of demand on me to create problems for them in training to work with.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to meet those needs.
And that's that guided discovery.
Yeah. And you create a situation, then you ask some questions, and you go, right, how do we solve this? What do you think? What should we do in this situation? And, and that's their needs at the moment. They're hungry for information. They're hungry to learn. And that's what I refer to as coaching in context. But it's essentially, I guess, non-linear learning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's referred to very much in the new blog at the moment that I've just done.
And that'll be up on your blog, which is footblogball.wordpress.com.
Yeah, I refer to the non-linear learning, that there's parallel learning. Everything in the game. If you have parallel learning, which means that if you're working on passing, you're also working on how to close off the pass, which is defending. So you've parallel content also, and you create deeper learning experiences for those who are ready, and also something that we spoke with earlier about the learner taking the path that works for him. There are multiple paths towards learning something. So if we're learning this passing and control thing in a game situation, maybe one young kid comes from the angle of communication. He needs to communicate verbally, non-verbally to get into positions. And that's where he learns. Another guy might learn from the fact of concentrating in the game on the technique. There are multiple paths and multiple solutions.
And I just looked it up right now. The title of that blog post is called "Turn the Curriculum on Its Head: Coaching in Context."
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So make sure everybody goes out and checks it out.
I hope so. Yeah. Please.
And then you talked about you have a book coming out. Do you know about when or when we can expect it?
Hopefully by April. I'm nearly finished it. I've done. It's basically based on children in sport, and I've done interviews with doctors who work with children who've been injured in sport through early specialization in one sport, and Olympic doctors. Jean Coté, Mark Upton, the Australian skills acquisition expert, absolutely fascinating, fantastic man with some great ideas. Lynn Kidman from New Zealand on the constraints-led approach to coaching. Dr. Martin Toms from Birmingham in England on who teaches and lectures on coaching and coaching behaviours. A friend of mine, Henok Goitom, who's played in La Liga in the Spanish league in Italy, about his childhood. But and of course Celso Borges, who played for Costa Rica in the World Cup in Brazil, and it's just a focus on his childhood as well. What was the glue that made them stick to the development process?
Yeah, and that's sort of what we try to do here with the podcast, Mark, is to learn a little bit more about players' development and what we can do to maybe change it or implement that ourselves with as parents or coaches.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you're doing that, and so we're looking forward to that book. When, where should we expect it to come out?
Well, I'll let you know. Hopefully April. I'm kind of about 75-80% there. I'm just trying.
Okay, and they would find it on your
on my blog.
On your blog,
but I'll email you and let you know.
Is there anything that that you think is important for us to know that we didn't ask about today, about player development or the article that you wrote?
Not that I think of. I have I think a big turning point for me in my coaching was I remember I did this, I was doing my UEFA A level here in Sweden, and they asked me to, we had to do kind of summary of our coaching philosophy. And I had been thinking this for a long time, and I think it's like this, it's not really about how I coach, it's more about how they learn. And I think that for me is very essential to how I coach and how I work with coaching. And I guess my blog is very much my educational journey. It's very much my journey, and my blog, I guess, is my teacher as well. It's been a great way of learning. I don't think I've ever learned so much in my life, actually.
Yeah, no, same here. I understand. So what you're saying then is, if people tell you that you're a great coach and you're trying to coach these kids and it's not working, it's not necessarily the kids' fault. You have to adapt to them.
Yeah, you have to adapt to the learners. They're the learners, and you have to adapt to them. They're all individuals. You have 16 players. You're dealing with 16 individuals. They have different pasts. They have different families, different situations, different everything. So it's very much about how they learn more than about how you coach. I mean, anyone can become a good instructor, but that doesn't make you a great coach, because then if you're a good instructor, you assume that once you've taught, they have learned.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you mentioned that, Mark. Actually, the last question that we always ask our guests is, if you have a 5-year-old, or if you had a 5-year-old, or if you were 5 years old and you were starting to get into soccer, what would be the best way to get that child involved with soccer to optimize and maximize their player development? What would be your path that you would?
By introducing them to the game without the thought of optimizing player development, I think because it's just a game to them. They, here's a ball. Let's go out into the garden and play, or let's kick it. Let's kick the ball around. It's just make it as much fun as possible. The focus should be fun. When I did this thing for 5-year-olds here where I live in Stockholm, I was so lucky because right next to this small pitch was a tree. And so when the parents came with kids, I always said that this is what we're doing. We're going to have fun. We have some footballs. We're going to have a lot of fun, play some games, and there's a tree over there. And one thing I can guarantee you is that within a few weeks, your son will enjoy playing football and he'll be very good at climbing a tree. I was right. Because a lot of them like to climb the tree and then come down and kick a ball and go back up and climb a tree. And you know what? It all helps. Mm-hmm. It's all part of play. And now the same group, they just play football when they come, and then they climb the tree after we play. And I've never told them to do that. It's very interesting. They made the choice themselves. It's fun and autonomy.
How old are they now?
To the development process.
Say it again, Mark.
Fun and autonomy, the glue that sticks us to the development process.
Yeah. And how old are they now?
They're 6 now.
Okay.
And it's great. They play themselves. They don't need me.
Yeah.
I just turn up and we have a ball. What do you want to do? Can we have a game? Okay, yeah, here. How do you want to structure the game? And they just play it, and it's great. And then we sometimes have some competitions where we have adults against kids, and they like that. That's just fun.
Oh yeah.
They love that. It's great. And then at the end, you see it. And we had a winters here now. We had the last football's fun day about 3 weeks ago, and I went back 2 hours later because I left some stuff at the clubhouse, and there's about 7 of them still there with their parents playing, just kicking a ball and running after the ball and loving it.
Yeah, so you mentioned a great point, Mark, and I'm glad you brought that up. Is that when you start your child out in soccer, don't go into it thinking player development.
No.
Just think, let them have fun, and if one day they want to pursue that on their own, then that's when we step in and help them out and guide them.
And give them, just guide them and give them the support they need.
Yeah, that's great. Great point. Thank you.
No problem.
So that concludes our show, Mark.
Thank you so
much for coming on. Thank you very much for taking the time. We definitely learned a lot. So many great points that you made. So I really, really appreciate you coming on.
No problem.
just want to thank Mark one more time for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I know I took away from some of his time with his family and his kids, and I really can't thank him enough for coming on and discussing his article with us. A lot of great insight, a lot of things that I learned from it, not just from the article, but also from the interview with Mark. I just want to remind you that if you like the show, and you think it's a benefit to people, consider giving us a 5-star review on iTunes. Consider sending it over to some of your friends and or family members in case they want to listen to it. Anyone that you feel might benefit from it, please feel free to send them a link to it. Always, you can reach me at Ernesto@youthsoccerevolution.com. That's my email. Feel free to reach out to me. I know some of you already have, and always like getting feedback from you. Don't forget to visit Mark's blog at footblogball.wordpress.com, and I'll also have a link to it on our show notes. If you visit Mark's website, you can keep tabs on when his new book will come out. As soon as it does come out, I'll make sure I let everyone know, and hopefully I can get a link to it to wherever it may be, and let you know in case you're interested in getting it. And also, if you like Mark's interview, make sure that you visit his blog and send him an email and let him know. I mean, I'm sure he loves feedback as well, and would definitely love to learn from you guys as well. So until next time, thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you in 2015.